because as you know, I'm all about transforming the standard North American way of aging. I don't believe we need to age the way we need to, but first of all, we have to understand it's our responsibility how we age, and we have to take the mindset on how we're going to do it. So, you know, I'm really thankful that you guys joined me today. And you know what? I've got my PowerPoint to actually work today. And because I'm going to be very, very respectful of time, because we all have very busy lives. And I realized this last month, especially this last month, of everything that has gone on with my work for the last year, what has gone on in my personal life, what has gone on in my physical life, and what has gone on in my environmental life, that I was not doing sufficient self-care. And I got to that point where last month, I hate to admit to it, but I had a major breakdown. And when I say a breakdown is I just took a step back and I stopped everything I was doing because I was having what turned out to be anxiety. And I have had anxiety since I was about probably 5 years old, that I can remember. So I am kind of an expert on this. And as well, I taught at the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition. So I believe there's not a family around who does not experience some kind of anxiety. And so I want to thank you for coming today. And I want to talk to you first about what it looks like, why we get it, and how we can, in my opinion, use Black Oxygen to reverse it. So to go into it, I want to make sure my screen share works this time, is we need to understand the central nervous system. So the central nervous system consists of two different types of cells. There are neurons, and then there are nerve cells themselves. Okay, so, and they're called the glial cells. These cells are very, very integrated cells that take a long time to reproduce, but they also have a role within everything that happens in our body, every single thing, along with the mitochondria. There is a lot of mitochondria within the nervous cells, as in the neurons, and there's also where all the messages and the hormones and everything crosses over. So the neurons is what we're going to be looking at. And so we have a cell body, we have an axon, and then we have synaptic terminals. So I'm going to show you with what I like to call, and then there's the dendrites. And these are, on the dendrites is where the messages come through, and the hormones or whatever is needed to be passed along, neurotransmitters, they come through these dendrites. They go through the cell and they make their way to the terminals, to the synapses. And from there, that's when the messages happen. Now this happens just like that. We don't even realize it's happening, and it should be constantly doing. But there's certain things that stop the dendrites from being able to pick up the neurotransmitters and make the messages and throw it through. And we're going to talk about exactly what those are in this topic today. So they transmit electrical and chemical signals from one cell to another across the synapses. They consist of dendrites, and I like to use my little fingers because it's almost like a little tree or little plants that are always searching out for really, really good things. And these dendrites are the information reception. So they're getting the information from there. We go to the cell body, the axons carry the action potential, so the message, and then it gets the information transferred over through the synapses. So there's so many different types of neurotransmitters and neurons that fill in it. There are approximately 100 billion neurons in your human brain, with thousands to tens of thousands of connections between each and every cell that has to have a message. So when you think about it like that way, we have to be intrigued that there's so much going on up here in the hundreds and hundreds of billions that we may not have everything operating correctly, and it may not necessarily show us what is where there's a fault until there's some major damage. And it may not show up for quite some time, and usually it shows up after the age of 50 if it's in a brain injury for types of prolonged stress or other things, but other times it shows up very, very young. So we have several different types of neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters, so that we're not scared, are the chemical imbalances that the psychiatric industry loves to confuse us with to make us feel like it's a scary kind of thing out there, and we need to give our power away to somebody else. And I believe, as somebody who taught brain health, that understanding these chemical imbalances or these chemicals or these neurotransmitters and how they interact in our body can take us to the most power of looking after ourselves when we have a brain gut health crisis. Because we're not just looking at a brain when we're talking brain disorders. We're looking at a whole function, because these neurotransmitters, they start in the gut, they work their way up through the digestive system, in and out of the digestive system. So that's why we know it's always important to serve a man really good food, because love comes from the stomach. We've known that forever, the smell of it. But we also know that memory and growth happens through these neurotransmitters, such as dopamine. We also know that dopamine has been hijacked by first of all, it's been hijacked by the food industry. It's been hijacked by the alcohol industry. It's been hijacked by the television and advertising industry. And the last one that is really scary is dopamine has been hijacked by the Facebook, by social media, by all of these industries, because they knew if they could target dopamine, they could keep us in a fight and flight response, because those catecholamines all kind of clump together. So there's dopamine, noradrenaline, adrenaline, and they're excitatory neurotransmitters. They regulate the sympathetic nervous system. So dopamine, again, is craving. It's reward driven. It's where we learn. It's our desire, our appetite, our motivation, our anticipation, our motor control, sleep, dream, libido. It's a pretty important one. And you think, I thought we're talking anxiety. Yeah, we are talking anxiety. Because if you're not producing dopamine, you are in the adrenaline and noradrenaline stage, because we all need to have a certain amount of dopamine going on first to make the neurons, the moves, the muscles move, for things to happen in our body. And then we add a little bit of the neurotransmitters like noradrenaline, which gives us the alertness, the arousal, the focus. It takes us from fight and flight. It's our stress response. It's like, how do I get going? Well, it increases our circulation. It increases our heart rate so that we get blood flow and oxygen everywhere we need it. And it increases, most importantly, our glucose metabolism, because we need the sugar to be able to move and run away from the mountain lion, okay? And then we have adrenaline, and that's also a fight and flight stress response, and glucose metabolism, increased circulation. Our blood pressure goes up and our heart rate goes up. So these are really important neurotransmitters, because with them comes another very important one, is the acetylcholine. And this is the one that's linked to Alzheimer's, and this one's a link to memory. And this is why when we're under a great deal of stress, we're not able to store our memories correctly, because they're there to help us with mental alertness, sensory perception, and voluntary motor control. So how could we be processing memories and trying to build and educate ourselves when we're in a fight and flight situation all the time. So this is the component of what anxiety looks like. It's fight and flight. These neurotransmitters are out there, and our body then needs to say, okay, I'm finished with those really, really scary situations now, and I'm going to produce the most amazing neurotransmitter out there, and that's GABA. Okay, and that's a neurotransmitter that contracts all the stimulating neurotransmitters that we were just talking about. It relaxes us and it calms us after stress. And then we have the glutamate, which is involved in cognition, the memory, the learning, the sensory messages. This is the building part, okay? This is where the memory now, and it's like, again, this does not happen when we are in anxiety mode. So this is why I'm educating us on this, because these important neurotransmitters that I'm talking about now are the calming ones. They're the finishing one. After we finish running after the saber-toothed tiger, after we finish dealing with pulling somebody out of the river, or after we finish dealing with the somebody screaming at you right now because everybody's in a stressful mode, just because we're living in a very stressful time that most of us have never lived in. You know, we're not building these neurotransmitters. And that's the thing that we have to be aware of. So endorphins are like an opiate. They modulate pain, they foster feelings of well-being, pleasure, and attachment. And then we all know about serotonin, and that's our memory, our good mood, or it helps us deliver away from pain. It's our happiness and contentment. But this is where digestion starts happening. This is where appetite comes into play. This is where we start finishing and going into the healing mode. This is where we produce 90% in our gut. And this is where, again, if leaky gut or things aren't working right there, we're not able to produce this. 90% of serotonin is made in the digestive system. Think about that. So, okay, the first group of neurotransmitters are shutting down our digestive system. If we're not producing the second set, then we're not producing or digesting or utilizing the nutrients that we take in. So this is where anxiety becomes a chronic condition as we start going on. Now, melatonin, everyone should have heard about this, but maybe not, because maybe it's not happening to you. Maybe you're not getting sleep. Maybe you're not getting your circadian rhythm working out. This is where antioxidant capacities help our bodies. This is where our body gets rid of the oxidated stress or aging or free radicals. This is when that's supposed to happen. Now, if our liver's not producing right, if our stomach hasn't, if our digestive system isn't having, if we got too much sugar, if we're not got good gut health, I mean, I could go on, and we're in fight and flight. We go to bed and we didn't deal with this. We work shift work. We do anything, especially shift work. I can't emphasize enough about how shift work will prevent the natural circadian rhythm from happening. So we get a group of people who may be first responders who work shift work, who are going to have anxiety, they're going to have all these things, and then they're going to start having health problems. And they're kind of like my focus of who I want to be working with. So I'm going to bring that up. So now you know the neurotransmitters. Now you know that it's imperative that's where we look at how to what they're for, and then we look at what is their essential nutrients that go along with that. And glucose fuels everything, and glucose is carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. Now, carbon is a free radical, hydrogen is a free radical. oxygen feeds the mitochondria. Sadly, we build free radicals when we are eating and producing food. So it's a reality of life. We need sufficient fats. The society has saying, put your kids on low fat, put your kids on zero fat. Don't eat fat because you're in the diet industry. Essential fats are essential. We need full fat to be able to absorb our minerals. But every cell in our body is made from essential fats. Every neurotransmitter is made from essential fats. Every neuron is essential fats. Then we have the phospholipids, which is a different type of fat. This is a very delicate fat. And this is what surrounds the fats for the to insulate the cells, but it also is, the neurotransmitters are made from this. And we get this phospholipids from choline. We get it from various fats that they've also told us to stay away from. But it's imperative we have this for anything to go on in the brain, for any cellular level to go on. We need the amino acids because we need to build the little organelles. We need to build muscles. We need to be able to build the structure of our neurotransmitters, because when neurotransmitters, say serotonin, for instance, we need tryptophan. We need tryptophan, zinc, and B3 to go from tryptophan breaks down to 5-HTP, 5-HTP breaks down to serotonin, serotonin breaks down to melatonin. You see? So these building blocks are used for everything. And then we have the vitamins and the minerals. So we need every bit of this for us to have optimal neurons and optimal ability to be able to handle fight and flight, or to be able to keep us in the ability to build the neurotransmitters to reduce the stress. And then there's one other component I want to talk about that's really important, that is a lot of people are carrying it, and it causes one of the greatest dysfunctions within the brain, and that's called methylation. And methylation is a biochemical process integral to the proper functioning of every biological system: neurological, digestive, immune, and circulatory. These biochemical reactions literally is donating a carbon and a hydrogen to a substrate for rebuilding cells, neurotransmitters and hormones, immune cells, chemical compounds, the molecules, so that we can utilize the zinc and break down amino acids, break down carbohydrates, break down phospholipid or lipids. It's also needed to build phospholipids within the cellular level. So functions of methylation: it turns on and off the genes. It processes chemicals and toxins, biochemicals, herbicides, xenoestrogens. It builds, synthesizes serotonin, melatonin, epinephrine. It processes the hormones. It builds our T cells, our NK cells. It DNA synthesis, produces energy, helps feed our mitochondria, builds and maintains protective coating in nerves and cell membranes, and methylation. And I mean, sorry, go back to that one, myelination. Myelination is the protective layer on every cell so that those messages get through. This is why I'm talking methylation. Methylation becomes faulty due to enzymic enzymes that are not produced. It is carried, the MTHFR enzyme. The MTHFR enzyme. People who cannot come out of anxiety generally have that. It gets tested by saliva, it gets tested with a cheek test. But most people won't test for it. But if you have somebody who has chronic conditions, and you can see why a faulty methylation enzyme, it builds everything in our body, right? Every single thing, biochemical reaction, is dealt with methylation. So we're not going to be able to build the neurotransmitters. Now, How does this happen? Through stress, imbalance of hormones, nutritional deficiencies, combated with poor diet, exercise. Are you getting good sleep? All these things start damaging the cell, start damaging the ability for these enzymes to be able to break down and utilize the foods the efficiency way that we can. It produces other hormones at the wrong time of the day. And those hormones, such as cortisol, when you're in fight and flight, again, anxiety is fight and flight, or what we used to call shyness in our little kid days. Everybody was shy, but maybe they had anxiety and were brushed under the thing. So they've gone through 50 years of thinking one way, when we can actually be mitigating the situation by looking after the body so that we're not constantly in fight and flight anymore, so that we're not producing the wrong hormones or neurotransmitters in our body. Now, this is where I loved it, because as you know, I'm a brain expert. I taught for 10 years at the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, where I taught perspective of aging and optimal nutrition for the brain. So I loved when I was introduced to fulvic, black oxygen, humic fulvic minerals, because when I looked at it, and my upline cousin, who's brought me 35 or 50 different supplements or products throughout her years, said to me, "Hey, Cheryl, what do you think of this one?" She was waiting for what I always say to her: absolutely not. I'm not interested. But when she handed me black oxygen, I said, I'm in, because it's inflammatory. You cannot produce the calming neurotransmitters, which were what? GABA, serotonin, endorphins. You can't be producing them when you're inflamed. We've seen the way the cell regeneration, we know that that's important. It balances the endocrine system. So we, in my field of practice, use a lot of adaptogens, because we know adaptogens balance our endocrine system. They help our body mitigate through stress. But when we have a lot of heavy metals, that interrupts the neurons. When you think about what neurons are made up of and what are toxic, so neurons are made up of fat. Our endocrine system is made up of fat, phospholipids, omega-3s, omega-6s, omega-9s. Heavy metals bind and love to hang out with fat. They love it. They combine very, very well. They chelate together. For us to absorb our nutrients, our minerals, we absorb them, say calcium, with full fat butter, so that we can get the absorption of the minerals into our digestive system, into our cells to work properly. So fulvic minerals does everything that we want it to do, in my opinion. It was just like, oh my gosh, this is everything a brain aging specialist could ever want. Everybody she ever knew that was going to age on, right? Who doesn't age? Somebody who dies. And I don't want to be in that category. So everybody on earth needs to be on fulvic humic minerals, according to me. So, again, I don't diagnose, I don't treat, and I do recommend, and that is part of my practice and my scope of practice. And I recommend the right things. So I recommend an organic source of fulvic humic minerals, and I have to be unbiased when I have one of my hats on. So I say organic, because it's live, it's full of oxygen, it's full of water, it's going to not be full of heavy metals, it's going to be bound together really nice. And as most of us know, 80% of our body is water, so it kind of goes really, really nice together. And fossilized is no water. It doesn't have that component. So in place of the water, the oxygen and the hydrogen is the heavy metals that, after hundreds of thousands of years of compressing to make it into a rock, becomes the, almost like what we're hearing about when we read about, oh, I hear fulvic minerals carries heavy metals. Well, yeah, hundreds of millions of years of compounding down products, a fossilized will carry some heavy metals. Our organic doesn't. So we're lucky that direction. So that's why I'm always promoting the organic route. So I'm going to stop sharing screen now and have a little conversation, like if anybody has any questions that they might want to ask me, and open up the floor. As you can see, it did definitely go back to the component that our neurons are fat, okay? Our neurons make the neurotransmitters, are the messengers that need certain requirements so that they can get the message through so that we're healthy. And then we just make sure our body is well nourished with the right components. So does anyone know anybody who doesn't have anxiety, or a whole house that doesn't have anxiety? Because that's where I want to move to. I want to live in that kind of fantasy world, because we're living in society where everybody has it now. It's important to recognize that because we have it, we also have the responsibility to live our best life that we've been given. So that is why I do what I do, by trying to educate, so that we can nourish the body the best we can. So now I'm open for questions.
Cheryl.
Yes, Sonia.
Can you hear?
I can.
I just start by thanking you for sharing your knowledge with us. You said a lot, and one thing that you said that I never thought about was like shyness. Being shy could be some form of anxiety. You know, like that speaks a lot, because I know as a kid I was shy. Like I didn't talk until I was in junior high school. You know, I was always that quiet kid, and I have one of those now. A son, one of my sons, he has experienced some anxiety throughout his lifetime. And when he was younger, he was very quiet and shy, and he's still that way now. And as he got into like the teen years, and now, you know, he's in his he's 20. But that is something to think about. And we do, you mentioned, I think FHR, and I always say that wrong.
MTHFR.
Yeah. Yes.
If you pronounce that out, it doesn't sound very nice, but I do for the shocking component, because it really truly does bugger you up in life.
Yeah. So did you say that people that have that, they usually can't come out of anxiety, or how does that relate to anxiety? Can you say that one more time? Like, can you repeat what you were saying regarding that?
Okay. So the MTHFR enzyme breaks down certain certain biochemical reactions within the body. Okay. So when we are building neurotransmitters, we use the building blocks of the amino acids, say tryptophan, and we use zinc and B vitamins. Okay. And zinc and B vitamins come into play, and they break the chain of the amino acid tryptophan. And then that tryptophan amino acid keeps breaking it down to the point where our body could utilize those messengers to build the neurotransmitters. So, but to do that, you need to have B vitamins, B3, B6, B5, B12, sufficient amounts of them, and zinc. So, and then the enzyme MTHFR, and that makes a nice break. And then from tryptophan, we go to serotonin, or 5-HTP. And then we break down that amino acid, or that biochemical component in our body, and again, zinc and B3 and B6 and B12. But when we're in stress mode, those B vitamins get used up very, very quickly because we're going from bang, 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 right? We're always needing to use it. Well, B vitamin is one of the vitamins that doesn't store in our body. So we lose that really quickly. It's gone, right? So now we also, and especially now I'm going to get a little bit more in tune, men, especially boys, lose their entire storage of zinc upon ejaculation, upon having ejaculation, due to the fact that they store their zinc in their semen, mostly. So they're already now short these neurotransmitters. Then you add these amino or minerals required for making the transaction. So now they're not able to pull out of the situation as easily. Stress will keep them in the fight and flight mode, whatever the stressor is. And this is something that I forgot to bring up that I actually should. One of the greatest stressors for anxiety, especially in kids, it's not just having the MTHFR enzyme that can't break down the amino acids and can't make the neurocomponent transmitters. It is food allergies, because food allergies, again, are a protein amino acid that stays and crosses over the blood-brain barrier, gets put right directly into the blood cells, go into the neurotransmitters or the cellular lock and key, and ends up having little tails that cause the inflammation to happen. So, I mean, there's so many components towards the anxiety that I can't say it's just this or this, but you start eliminating the things that we know food-wise. The two top ones for kids, for everybody in anxiety, is gluten and casein, milk and dairy. Those proteins cross over. We can't break them down if we have those inability to have the enzyme, and then we're more likely to not be able to produce the GABA, because I like to say, if I go to a bank and I give you $100, right? And I take out $40, and then I take out $30, and then I take out $20 for another emergency, and then I take out $10. When I have that last emergency, I'm not going to be able to cover it. I'm not going to be able to cover the wine that maybe comes after dinner. You know, I'm maybe not going to be able to cover the dessert that's going to give me the pleasure, because I've already spent all my money somewhere else. And that's how I like to look at the neurotransmitters, or the building blocks, or the amino acids, the fats, the vitamins, the minerals that are required to build all the transactions, and then the enzymes as well. So when you go and think about what fulvic humic minerals will do for us, it'll bring us down to that calming component, so that it takes us out of the fight and the flight. We know it works with inflammation. So say we do a small little 15-day, I do everything in 21 days, because 21 days is when you can really, truly feel the difference. Even though my histamine reaction changes in 5, it might take me 21 days to realize that back pain across is actually caused from the gluten I ate yesterday, because my immune responses are down. But Black Oxygen works towards reducing the immune response, the inflammation, the histamine, by the endocrine system, by balancing out the adaptogens, by nourishing the cells so that we're not in the fight and flight mode the entire time. Because when you're malnourished, you're in fight and flight. When you're fighting a virus, you're in fight and flight. When you're fighting whatever you're fighting, you know, the fighting with the guy down the road because he's watering his lawn and it's in a drought, or fighting the heat, whatever it is, you need the building blocks, you need to nourish your body, and you need to be able to finish the transaction. And if you don't finish it, your body will not come out of that response. Long answer. I'm sorry, Sonia, but so I can never give a quick answer just to that, because of the component. And somebody will say to me, do you think black oxygen will work with this? And I'm like, oh yeah, but you want to change your diet. I had to go for a run today. I had to beat the heat. I have to make sure I'm drinking enough fluids. It's not a wonder thing, but we need to be fully 100% aware of how our body is working and what we're doing for it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining that.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything? We've got about 5 minutes more before I have to run out the door. So a couple more questions, and then I got to go do some self-care. No, we're good. Perfect. Thank you guys so much for showing up. And, you know, if you have any questions that come to you after, it's like, wow, what was that all about? She went through a lot of information. I will make this video available in the mudroom so that we can look at it again. Again, think of fueling your body with the right building blocks or the right dollar, how you would draw it, where it's going, what else is going on in your life. And above all, drink your black oxygen, because we know it's changing lives.
Yeah. Thanks, Cheryl. That was really good. Well done.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.